In 1910, the ocean liner Lusitania was battling its way through a very heavy sea in a storm. See, ocean liners aren't like cruise ships. When bad weather comes up, they can't just go around it. Like a city bus, they have to maintain a regular schedule, so if there's a storm, they have to go right through it. The Lusitania and its running mate, the Mauretania, were the two largest and most modern, luxurious ships afloat at the time. For passengers, they must have seemed like floating cities, almost 32,000 gross registered tons and 787 feet, or 240 meters long. Regardless of how big the ships were though, the ocean was mightier, and in heavy seas they would roll and pitch up and down in the big waves. In 1910, the US eastern seaboard was experiencing a very nasty winter snap, with the blizzard engulfing New York City, and at sea, things weren't much better. Lusitania was battling its way through 50-knot winds and a 30-foot or 9-meter swell. At about 6 p.m, the ship's captain, Turner, left the bridge to retire for the night, but he had scarcely stepped away when something was spotted ahead. It was a towering mountain of water, a monster wave that the ship's crew, 22 meters above the ocean, were looking at eye to eye. But then, as the wave was getting closer and the men on the bridge began to brace themselves, the Lusitania pitched downward into a trough and the wave reared up well above the ship. With enormous force, it smashed over the top of the bridge, totally engulfing the massive ocean liner in white water. The bridge windows smashed in immediately, and the men inside held on for dear life as seawater roared in and swept them off their feet. In fact, the bridge was flooded up to 5 feet or 150 centimeters. The wave smashed along Lusitania's length until it was left behind, and incredibly, the Lusitania continued on its way. Afterwards, the men on the bridge picked themselves up. The helmsman, who had been steering the ship, had been flung backwards into a wall and found that he was still holding the ship's wheel in his hands. It had just broken clean off its base. Then the men realized, to their horror, that a fellow officer had been standing on a compass platform way up above the bridge. Somehow he had held on, and even though he was about 8 or 9 stories above the ocean, his legs were swamped by the water. To him, it must have looked like the Lusitania was diving into the ocean, only to never return. But Lusitania did return. The ship continued on its way after being thoroughly checked and arrived in New York a few days later. The bridge windows had been shattered and the whole bridge front had been smashed backwards by about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Not only that, but 4 of the ship's lifeboats, each securely tied down and weighing about a ton each, had been ripped away. Amazingly, there were no fatalities or injuries in this encounter, but for a moment there, it must have seemed like it was the end for Lusitania's passengers and crew.